Episode 104. Gary, Saturday. What's going on?
Strange day, strange venue. I have work being done on my original studio, so this is studio two of Hot Water history, at least at my end.
I think it looks better than Studio One. For the people that are watching the video, he's got a cool icon over his right shoulder. He's got our book over the left. Everything just seems a little closer. Have you read all of those books on the bookshelf?
Most of them. I mean, there are some children's books up there for the kids, but they're all arranged. This is where I keep the library. Yeah.
I thought the Bernarda episode was really good.
Glad you liked it. We missed you, what with the salsa dancing with the old women.
Yeah, that was funny. I uh I like I'm starting to like those types of episodes. We do Meanwhile in Oak Park. It's just a little more local. And then I think it's just a good perspective to get, someone that's been from there. And it's could be a theme that we do this year. So if people like more of those types of episodes, let us know. I
Is Win
definitely,
Lacey the only Oak Parker we've ever had on the show?
it's got to be right.
I would think so. That's why that's why it's so good. She's the exception to the rule, but if we had more Oak Parkers, this show would immediately start to suck.
I don't remember if we did Meanwhile in Oak Park with Win Lacey or if we were even doing it at the
I don't
time.
think we were
I
doing it
don't
yet.
think we were either. By the
Hmm.
way, we got some good Meanwhile in Oak Parks today. So
Ooh, looking
stick
forward to
around
it.
for that. We've got I don't want to give too much away here, but Darth Vader returns.
Oh boy.
So we'll talk about that later. Anyways, we want to talk about two things today. We had this awesome Tucker, by the way, who's over the last 3 years is just going on. He's having a moment, and then
He's on a heater.
he's on a bit of a heater. And then Alistair Crooke wrote this article. I think I want to start here because I think this can kind of lead into the Tucker Bret Weinstein podcast. Alistair Crooke, he writes this article for the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity called Something Lost, Never to Be Found Again. And I'm sure I'll give you your take on this, but my original take on this is it's very similar to the revolution was. At least
Correct.
there's a lot of similarities there where we have to stop admitting to we have to stop faking victories. That these aren't he mentions the big example he uses is the conflict in Ukraine and how the mainstream media still is trying to push this push this total win narrative for the West, and that people aren't that dumb. I remember, I'm just going to say this example, and then I want to hear your take. But Charles Barkley, he was being interviewed for 60 Minutes, and Charles Barkley, if the NBA games are ever just brutal, he'll just zone out completely, and he'll be like, this is terrible. This is
Hmm.
not real basketball. He's very cold-blooded when it comes to that stuff. So the interviewer pushed him on that a little bit. Like, why are you so hard on some of the games? And Charles goes, because the viewers aren't dumb, you know.
Hmm.
And that's a good point. Like, there's such a there, there's this weird gap between how smart people are and how smart these people think their listeners are.
Okay.
And eventually people are going to start waking up to people are going to start waking up to all of this stuff. And I think a lot of the same similarities to both the conclusion of the end of our book, that Charles Barkley quote I just said, and then the revolution was, where we have to just
Mhm.
we have to give up the fake narratives that just are eventually gonna hit their expiration date.
And what to you is the fakest or most inauthentic, disingenuous narrative that Garrett through the revolution was attempted to convey?
Say that again. Sorry, the Garrett thing.
Correct. What was the narrative that was the most inauthentic and disingenuous, the most unreal, if you will, that the establishment or mainstream media at the time in the 1930s for him and 1940s, what was the main storyline or account that he most deconstructed?
So I think that this is something, I don't know if this is exactly something that Garrett said, but I know that this was a theme that he covered, and I see this theme a lot. Just the theme of timing, that we're close to turning it around, that we're right there, just one more election, one more vote, and all of that utopian, almost utopian revival of what used to be, that's going to be back, that we're able to save all of these, that for like conservatives, for example, we're able to conserve these values. All that stuff's gone.
Correct.
That stuff's not, it's not, it was, it isn't it's anymore, it's past tense.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and then of course that the New Deal had inaugurated a new system that was so alien and foreign to the previous America as it was defined that the experiment had thus concluded. And then off on this more socialistic and totalitarian path did the Roosevelt and administration and New Dealers set the country that people, although the propaganda was so real and in your face that many were convinced of it, that the path that America was on or had been put on forcefully by this totalitarian regime, all the while fighting a war to end totalitarian regimes or defeat totalitarian regimes on foreign shores, was propagated and then pursued. Of course, what was going on was the establishment of a totalitarian regime proverbially right under our noses or their noses at the time. And so your comparison is, I find, to be very apt and accurate when we're reading the Crook piece, because he's saying what the current regime and establishment, the they, if you will, are attempting to sell us. In your Charles Barkley analogy, it's not entertaining anymore because ultimately it had to be based on some facet of reality. And as the kinetic war of the Ukraine-Russia conflict is concluding, it's not fun to deal with the real ramifications of a disastrous campaign in which Ukraine was set forth as a victim proxy for the West and its regime. And Russia is seen as this existential enemy that was supposed to be defeated, could have been defeated according to the narrative, if only more aid, more weaponry, more funding, more war material in support of, yet again, a fascistic, Nazi-filled totalitarian regime against Russia, the big bear. It could have come to fruition if only the political resolve were to have manifested itself. And Crook is just pointing out, not unlike Garrett in his time, the erroneous conclusion and the brainwashing that people have undergone to allow themselves to draw that final conclusion. Should
I
we read
like,
from the piece a little bit?
yeah, I'm gonna talk about this one. People often ask why is there so little empathy evident today? Why do states talk past each other? Why are channels of communication jammed? Well, that's why. And he talks about the win narratives and the lose narratives. Flip narratives based on easily exposed untruths. And then let me finish with this paragraph. Yet the Western defeat in Ukraine may be but one part to an accumulation of Western defeats. Defeat in Israel, for one, would strike at the very core of US political being, too close to the quick to be lightly brushed aside. And there may be more hurts to come in the Middle East. So, okay, sorry, I got super distracted when can we talk about, I haven't even talked to you at all about this.
Okay.
The underground Jews,
The tunnels beneath the synagogue.
the tunnels in New York.
New York, yes.
How much have you heard about this?
Oh, I read the official statement from the synagogue.
Okay, so more than I have, but did they just fill it up afterwards?
I don't know what I I don't know what the synagogue did. It's just the official statement read, from what I can recollect. It's been a little bit more than a week, I think, since I read the official statement, but that they were closing it off and then cooperating with NYPD investigators. So, and they blamed it on a rogue band of Hasidic Jews that had been operating in secret beneath the synagogue. Strikes me as odd because in our own buildings of worship and churches, if some major construction project was taking place and ongoing underneath, that's no small feat to build a network of tunnels that, by the way, connect to sewer and tunnels that are public. You might have seen the images of Jews, of individual believers from the synagogue as they are found out. They came up through the vent system and ordinary sidewalks. You didn't see that?
No, I did see that,
Oh,
but
you did see that. Okay, so this is no small project that they had undertaken. So it's sort of betrays expectation. It would be absurd to think that the authorities in the synagogue didn't know that this was going on. The scandal, of course, is that there were mattresses, dirty mattresses down in the synagogue. Now, if it turns out that this was just a bunch of Orthodox Jews that had built these tunnels in anticipation of being uh, like a sort of Jewish catacomb type of thing where worship is going on, still strikes me as odd that you would have mattresses down there if worship was going on so as to defy COVID orders dating back to 2020. But in any case, it's odd. Why is it that you made the connection between the, just if you could explain what
I just
or it
thought,
just popped in your head?
yeah, I saw it. I saw Israel. Israel was in the article, so
Oh, okay, sure. Well,
yeah,
go ahead.
it just kind of a bizarre story. I think
Very.
2024 is already off to a bizarre start, which was kind of to be expected with a American presidential election
Well,
happening this
that
year.
I was listening to Clint Russell, one of his recent episodes. He goes, "I, you got the Miami Nephilim story where the absurd amount of police are directed to a mall because of unruly teenagers, and then you got all these different things going on from the tunnels in New York to the now active war, undeclared yet again, unconstitutional yet again, conducted by the UK and the US against the Houthis in Yemen. So poor Yemenis can't get a break. You could blame the Yemenis and the Houthis all you want for trying to bottle up the Straits of Hormuz. Oh no, it's not the Straits of Hormuz. What is that? It's this, what is the strait that leads from the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean? I'm so ashamed of myself. All the way through to the Red Sea. I forget what that's called, but anyway, it's right near Djibouti and the Horn of Africa. They're trying to inhibit passage of, again, oil tankers that, by the way, are being used to provide energy for Europe. So you have to wonder why the United States yet again is involved in a war to supply oil. This is a narrative that keeps hitting the newsreels, that the United States is fighting wars, whether it be Russia and Ukraine, or now Israel and the Palestinians, and now the Houthis, and by proxy Iran and Hezbollah. Or the United States is engaged in a war so as to yet again secure foreign energy sources for Europe. So, but yeah, I think all of these stories about which we're speaking contribute to what Crooke is getting into, about how eventually, whether it's because of alternative news sources, whether it's just the existence of the internet itself, but no longer can nation states, or in fact their governments, continue to obfuscate and obscure what's going on in the world to such a degree that you can have, at least for a limited time, someone like Walter Cronkite come on and say, well, there are two sides to the issue of what's going on in Vietnam. And then in the end, when it's patently obvious that Vietnam's a disaster, he comes out and starts being anti-war, and making excuses for the regime, or even trying to abdicate responsibility for reporting that everything was going fine in the past. You just can't do that anymore. So Crick is seeing the edifice of Western civilization fall. And what I find most telling about the connection that we were able to draw between, as you brought it up before, the Bret Weinstein interview, in which he, of course, speaks at length with Tucker about the COVID regime and the vaccine and pharmaceutical industrial complex, and his challenge, he and Heather Weinstein, his wife's challenge to it, which has been nothing short of heroic so far, and I suspect will continue to be. The connection here is that the West narrative, we're seeing not so much even in the Garrett sense, the end of Western civilization. The end of Western civilization has already occurred. And what we're living with is the embers, the ashes, the residual effect of a once great mode of living, value system, the greatest in human history. And while the effects of eating the seed corn allow our civilization to continue to persist, it doesn't mean it's flourishing. And if a civilization isn't flourishing and can't find its raison d'etre, its reason to be, and we're arguing over the definition of what a woman is, to what constitutes just war, to what the purpose of continuing on and, for example, perpetuating another generation of people within this civilization, well, then the game's up. The gig is up, right? The gig is up. He has this immense brilliance in this article. I would just want to read a couple of the paragraphs, if you don't mind, that I found most telling and elucidating. He said, this is the deep fear of Western political leaders. They know the narrative to be a fiction. Nonetheless, they go on telling it to themselves, despite knowing that our era has been made increasingly and dangerously contingent on this meta myth. Namely, that there's a moral, ethical, scientific, evident justification and superiority of Western culture over the others, the Orient. Absent the myth, he goes on to say, they sense the Western project and Western prosperity could disintegrate utterly. In other words, you can only go so long on fiat in everything, from currency to food to culture, for so long, until natural and divine law catch up with you. He goes on to say, the elect, in quotes, hope that the dredged up chimeric dreams of material prosperity and Western savoir-faire could still prop the myth aloft, but only and only if the West possessed the better narrative. The right narrative was everything. It had to outmatch and outshine the clunky narratives of adversaries. This deceptive covenant had to endure at all cost, lest the babbled veneer of the myth had come undone. Excuse me. So the narrative factory is put hard to work. The kinetic war in the Ukraine is settled in an evident and overwhelming Russian victory, albeit without yet being, in quote, over. Of course not. Ukraine was but one single battlescape in the wider struggle to force the Rimland, that is to say, the Atlanticist world, to accept an agreed upon frontier between it and the heartland, Russia, China, and their Asian depth, and gracefully to renounce its claim to exceptionality in determining our global future. Beautifully written, and I have not run across something that with such precision and in such a concise manner sums up the current state of Western civilization as it limps on into non-existence or limps on into its crippled stage or
Yeah.
beyond crippled stage. It's
I like
death
referencing
knell.
it to limping.
You like the analogy of the
I like
limping?
I like the limping analogy. That's what it feels like. And
I would go so far as to say the West is in hospice.
oh, why do you say that?
Well, in hospice, what do you have? You have someone who's recognized as dying,
Hmm.
and you have its supporters or adherents, close relatives, friends, people who depend upon the narrative continuing, a narrative of Western superiority, pseudo capitalism that really exists and operates more so as quasi socialism. There to, and it comes from all of the established circles, whether they be in government itself, in the deep state. I mean, is it even compatible, the idea that you'd have the nation that exemplifies, or at one time exemplified the triumph of Western civilization, and that's the United States, with its prosperity, its supposed adherence to principles of limited government and the like, become the large. Think about the irony here of that city on a hill and beacon of hope, the, in a sense, climax of Western civilization and its greatest fruit, composing a political order in which it was designed by its best and brightest to have perpetually limited and restrictive government, which would protect through its establishment of negative rights and liberties, individual rights, as spoken of at length in the Enlightenment by the likes of Locke and Rousseau and Hobbes. Okay. So you're going to have that. Well, maybe not Hobbes that much, but you get what my point is. We could throw Voltaire and Montesquieu in there. And then within that same national entity, I won't call it a national entity. Let's call it a political unit. It becomes the largest, most powerful, most expansive, unwieldy, and uncontrollable government in human history. I mean, there's no reining it in. The malfeasant cat is out of the bag, and it's not going back in. So, and so many Western countries have, either in terms of sheer material wealth, or just and the whole civilizational experiment, have depended upon the United States. To see it crumbling so quickly, it's a wild time to live. I'll tell you that much. It's a
Yeah.
wild time to live, but it really is incumbent upon people of some basic modicum of intelligence to reject these propagandic accounts that everything's fine, we're still winning, Um, the stock market is roaring, so our economy's strong. The official numbers from that same government that would like you to believe that unemployment is low and the economy's humming. They're still gonna the Bureau of Labor Statistics is gonna put that out. The Fed and is gonna march Jerome Powell and Lael Brainerd out there to talk about how everything's fine. And Janet Yellen will continue to insist that the dollar reserve system is alive and well. Um, all the while, BRICS is out there as a challenger. I mean, I it's one of those oddities where I'd rather not live in another period, and yet I don't want to see what the consequences are for all of this malfeasance.
So hospice.
Yes. It sounds like black pill, but you know what? The thing is that
It does
from
sound
death
like
of
black pill.
a, yeah, it's a, this body politic is riddled with cancerous tumor. It's riddled with disease. It needs to be utterly rejected. It has to die a cleansing death in order for something better, some shoots to grow from it.
Yeah. Let's talk Bret Weinstein.
Okay.
Bret Weinstein goes on Tucker.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of some staggering stuff that he's been. This would be so frustrating. It's one thing for a guy like me to be calling out the vaccine stuff, but a true scientist, someone that actually it's their profession and what they do, to be censored and ostracized and basically put into a box and said, censored, don't listen to this guy. His work, like you said earlier, has been heroic, and he goes on Tucker to give a bit of an update on some of the side effects and the reasons, which I never knew, the reasons for the side effects of the vaccine, which goes deeper into the biology behind it. And they talked about, he said, and I want to get this right, but it was either 17 or 19 million
Correct.
deaths
Right.
that he was attributing to the vaccine.
Right.
I think the number was 1 in 800.
Well, the 1 in 800 was from the trials that Pfizer had conducted.
Mm. You're right. I mixed that up.
Yeah, the fatality consequence rate was 1 in 800 in the Pfizer trials, which of course they didn't release until
Right.
much later.
And there's probably been there has been billions of shots
Yes.
administered
Mm-hmm.
throughout the world. This is a bit of a black pill episode, but he did end up with a white pill by saying that all of most of the intelligent, competent people are now waking up, and the establishments force them away. And now
Yes.
the term he used was dream team. Now there's a dream team facing. That is a white pill that I do see as well. But what was your take on the whole episode?
Well, to the point of that dream team thing, that was the greatest white pill that I had heard in a long time, especially from someone who had unearthed so much information and was able to do the work and investigation. Um, and he compliments everyone from Naomi Wolf to Peter McCullough to Joe Rogan. So he's aware, and Scott Atlas. He's aware, and Jay Bhattacharya and Martin Koldor. So um, he's aware of what transpired down to the nitty gritty and the statistics and the studies. And the truth is, naming those names, whether they be in medicine or virology or epidemiology or in the media and alternative media, and those who are just competent truth sayers. So that he says that what COVID has made manifest and has created are a more passionate than ever dream team of the greatest minds, the critical thinkers who distinguish themselves very nobly during this whole affair and are willing to continue to pursue the truth, even in the face of very adverse consequences and effects. So he's certainly one of those. That's what I took as hopeful from all of that. As Tucker asked him, this is pretty, he basically, Tucker said, this is pretty black pilled, but and Weinstein offered that white pill of optimism. The other thing I took, of course, which I found most profound and connected to the Alistair Crooke piece, is that he went on at length to talk about how the whole COVID pandemic hysteria is really an episode for him where he woke up. And meanwhile, you have to also credit him, that is to say, Bret Weinstein, because just this week he openly revealed that there was a tweet from him early on in COVID, and he said he was castigating and upbraiding those who are mask hesitant.
Mm.
And he said, I'm going to actually move to erase this from my Twitter account, not because I'm trying to cover it up. And he represented it, but it's because people um, who are simping for the pharma industry and apologists for Birx and Fauci and Trump and Biden and you name it, the Raimondis and who was that other apparatchik, the one who was head of the CDC, Rochelle Walensky's of the world, are using it against him, and they're using it against the cause of moving forward to make people aware of their health choices and the consequences of being vaccine injured. So he didn't want that out there, but he sees this as yet, just like Alistair Crooke focuses on, although Crooke also talks about COVID. But as much as Crooke talks about how the kinetic war of Ukraine and the failure of the propaganda is a sign of the terminal nature of Western civilization, so too, Weinstein seems to indicated and thought that COVID was, it strikes at the idea that Western science, Western inquiry, thought to be, and institutions that were thought to be so utterly superior to the alternatives of the East and other civilizations, from the Islamic and Sino or whatever they might be, that story is patently false. These are corrupted. They're dirty. They're slapsistic in nature. So the self-serving and criminal are at the head of these things. And it proves the point of what Friedman and others have said, James Buchanan and others have time and time again said through their own work, is just, look, the worst sort of people rise to the top. The cream is an odious one if it's separated when we're talking about government. Those who advance are the most psychotic. Those who advance are the most prone to being honeypotted. Those who advance are the ones that are least moved by logic, reasoning, and even sympathetic pleas to those to whom they're supposed to serve. And also they're the most vulnerable to believing that while they can engage in these terrible acts for an eventual outcome, the means justified by the ends, they're the ones that are most convinced of that. So you see that within the climate hoax. I just saw, did you see this graphic? I have to confirm that it's true, but that Greta Thunberg, her personal net worth is $18 million.
I didn't see that.
Yes. So yeah, these are the monsters among us. And as we're talking about Western civilization and hospice, hopefully you strike off the head eventually, and whether that be the head of the Roman Catholic Church or it be the head of the even symbolic head of the climate change hoax, The watermelon that is, green on the outside, always red in the inside. Well, uh, all the better. The faster we'll be able to recover and not just persevere, but thrive and prosper.
Do you want to talk about a town that could use some of that advice to prosper?
I'd love to. We'll call it fraternal correction.
Oak Park has a rats problem. Rats persist as unwelcome guests in Oak Park. Residents say there's an increase in the pesky problem around town. The battle for one Oak Park resident began last summer after she noticed her dog was anxiously wanting to go outside more frequently. She discovered rats in her backyard and garage were drawing her dog's attention. Quote, "We basically caught 32 rats in 1 week."
Oh my God. That's an infestation.
Said the woman, who asked that her name be withheld to protect her employment status.
That's odd. Why would her
Where do you work?
why would her employment status be imperiled?
1 week, she exclaims. The large quantity of rats had her concerned, but the problem just kept getting worse. As the summer progressed, they became more ballsy, she said. It got to the point where we did not even go to the backyard because there were so many.
Oh my God.
So she called the village asking for help exterminating the infestation, she said, but they only left one trap. Then she discovered there were the rat droppings and a dead newborn rat in her home.
Oh, wait, say that one again?
So she called the village asking for help exterminating the infestation, she said, but they only left one trap. Then she discovered there were the rat droppings and a dead newborn rat in her home.
Holy crap.
It was too much. She has yet to see the village take serious steps to reduce the rat problem, she said. Quote, "I pay a lot in taxes," she
You
added.
sure do, lady.
Yeah,
you sure do.
You do. You do. I kind of expect that I can use my outdoor space or indoor space.
Now she's being too bold.
She is not alone. Oak Parkers are reporting on social media and elsewhere that the population of rats in the village appears to have increased from photos of rat holes in alleys to photos of dead bodies by dumpsters. The complaints have been stacking up. It's not surprising, some say. After all, neighboring Chicago is the city with the #1 rat problem in the country, according to a list by Orkin. I don't know. I feel like that is kind of surprising, having catching 32 rats in 1 week.
That's
You know, there's other towns that are also near Chicago.
right. It's not as if they is there some rat tourist destination in Oak Park that they opened up?
And then
Rats and fun? I don't
guess who comes into this to save the day?
Chapel Magruder.
However, Teresa Chappell, public health director for Oak Park, said she has not noticed an increase in rat reports in Oak Park.
Well, as long as she doesn't at least as long as she doesn't notice it, it's not a problem, right?
Trust the science. There are a few ways, she offered, that the village responds to rat problems: education, mitigation, and extermination.
I'm sorry, but this
EME.
is too cool. She's like the female version of Jesse Jackson giving a speech.
Yeah. If the
The
village
politification of the extermination of the rodentification.
If the village receives multiple calls from a specific area or block about a rat problem, they will warn the residents in that area about the sightings and offer educational materials, Chappell said.
Wait a second. What?
No.
Okay,
I did
sorry, go
just,
ahead.
I'll read it again. If the village receives multiple calls from a specific area or block about a rat problem, they will warn the residents in that area about the sightings and offer educational materials.
Such as there's a rat problem in your neighborhood.
Notice rat problem here. If a resident or business owner were to contact the village about a specific rat problem at their property, they will be told to fill out a release form on the village website, allowing the exterminator the village partners with pest management services to leave a bait trap. Sometimes they will use poison, depending on the situation, Chappell said. Quote, the service comes out in the winter every other week, in the spring once a week, and in the summer twice a week, she said. The response time depends on the resident or business owner with a rat problem sending the request in by a certain time, Chappell said. To get in on the exterminator scheduled for the week, otherwise they'll have to wait an additional week. The exterminator will keep in touch about their process, Chappell said, and when they'll be back to follow up. Quote, if they don't see any activity after 3 times, then they close the case, she said. The village also works to have educational information on social media and on its website, Chappell said, to explain how to keep the rat population down and prevent a problem. Rats are attracted to yards that are overgrown, food sources, trash, and more, she said. Ingo Schaefer, an Oak Park resident of more than 50 years. Oh my goodness, this guy, I don't know how you stick around for 50 years, but said, has noticed rats around his property located at a duplex he owns on South Ridgeland Avenue, but none at his personal home. Quote, I've seen them scurrying across the alley, he said, in particular when it's dark. He has not reported the issue to the village, he said, but he has seen other people on Facebook complain about the problem. The infestation seems to have increased, Schaefer said. I haven't seen rats in years, he said. Most recently I have. This is so stupid. What are we even talking about? Like the time that it takes to read this whole article should be like the amount of time before we have someone ready to get the rats.
Yes.
And that's how it would be.
Well said.
That's how it would be if it was like a business. Like if you found out, if you had a customer that had rat problems in their home, like you have to do everything you can to keep them. But here we are in a competitionless system.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no rush. Just fill out a form on the village website and, hopefully they can come get, hopefully you made it in time before they came out here. If you didn't, you'll probably have to wait another week. Have you been throwing out your trash?
Have you been
insane.
have
It's
you been
insane.
defecating in your backyard?
Yeah, it's insane.
They you don't remember those Orkin commercials? You were probably too young, but there used to be Orkin man commercials that were on TV all the time. At no point in those commercials did they say, you have a rat infestation in your home. And Orkin's here to tell you we're here with all the educational material you could possibly want to know how to mitigate the rat problem. And that's what we're selling, Orkin. Right? So and then if they continue, if you haven't seen them for 3 days, we'll just go ahead and imagine that they're not there. I mean, or if you keep calling in, hey, saw another rat. There's a dead one. Right?
Yeah.
The dog's barking upstairs. So yeah, maybe he found a rat. Hopefully not in Westchester that far. So but anyway, yeah, there's no profit loss calculus. There's no reason for Chapel Magruder or anyone else. It's so funny. I would like to ask her what in her wide range of experiences and her credentials have and her education have told her about the public health effects of having a village bombarded by rats and the consequences thereof. Does she have an answer to that or just more literature?
One attraction for the pest could be garbage, Schaefer said, due to trucks potentially dropping trash with the mechanical pickup. He said he's cleaned up after the trash pickup several times. Another attraction for rats could be residents not properly picking up after their dogs, he said, as he's seen an increase in waste left around in the last several months. He said he worries about the rats getting into his house as well. You worry about disease, you worry about cleanliness, he said. They're pretty nasty animals. Overfilling dumpsters and not picking up after dogs are two bigger issues that attract rats, Chappell said. They really enjoy dog feces, she said. I read a report that said that's considered caviar to rats. Schaefer said he has seen the village lay out bait traps to catch rats, but does not know if those are recently set or from past problems. He said he hopes the village will address the rats, although he thinks it's an even bigger problem in neighboring communities. Quote, I suspect the village is doing a reasonable job with what they're facing, he said.
I suspect. Look at here.
Ingo Schaefer. Ingo
I
Schaefer.
suspect reasonable.
Ingo Schaefer, you need to read. You need to read the Wednesday Journal and tune into Meanwhile in Oak Park to learn
We'll
more
send him
about
a copy.
more about the town you've been living in for the last 50 years.
We'll make it an 8-track version. Oh, I don't use these fancy fangled cassette tapes. Digital media? What the hell is that?
There was one other story. It's too long of a story. They decided to write an entire book about this, but District 97 enrolling migrant students.
We covered that in a previous episode, yeah.
Oak Park Elementary District focuses on warm welcome.
This is insane. That's the other thing. The migrant crisis is another death knell of Western civilization, but we're going to hear a more local story about that, more provincial story, let's say.
As Oak Park's District 97 elementary schools welcome the first wave of migrant students into the district reiterates that Oak Park will be a welcoming place for all.
Except the current residents.
According to Michael, especially rats too. According to Michael Ahrensdorf, Chief Technology Officer, there are currently 162 asylum seekers in the village of Oak Park. 57 of them are children under the age of 18. In our community, whenever there are students, school-age children who want to be enrolled in school, we welcome students into the school district, said Dr. Ushma Shah. Currently, D97 has 52 migrants enrolled. Yeah.
Have they been tested for tuberculosis?
Yeah, I don't even know if they get COVID tests.
I don't think so.
I'm trying to find any other. Currently, the district is working on instructional program planning as well as developing transitional bilingual education programs, a teaching approach that focuses on daily instruction in English and allows the student to use their home language when needed. So I don't know exactly how that works.
It doesn't. There's your answer.
This type of program allows the flexibility to meet various student needs, regardless of their English proficiency levels, and is also a requirement by the state board once a school has 20 or more English language learners. That seems kind of bizarre. Our numbers, I don't even care about this. Whether or not the number of migrant students enrolled at D97 at any given time will change is up in the air, as Oak Park Village trustees voted 4-3 in November to provide $500,000 in unspent federal funds, extending its previous emergency declaration through February 6th. The constant emergency state.
You got it. There's your excuse.
911 24/7.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Constant emergency state. How is that? Isn't that just a microcosmic version of the Bill Kristol, William F. Buckley? We're in a constant state of emergency in the Cold War, so therefore we need, in order to defeat a totalitarian state, we have to become totalitarian. That's it.
It's
It
insane.
justifies all these heinous acts of trampling upon individuals' rights, including the right to their own labor and the fruits of it.
At Holmes, elementary school, I think, Bienvenidos a Holmes welcome sign serves as the first visual to the warm welcome being extended to migrant students. And in hopes of facilitating communication, the district provided a direct number parents can call to leave a voicemail that is associated with their Let's Talk communication platform, which can be used by anyone in the D97 community.
We're having the conversation.
Let's talk. But as the district, end quote. This is the last quote. The way things happen as we receive students, we need to be able to we need to be able to adjust, said De Leon. Yeah, so.
Come on in. Come on in, more migrants. We need more migrants.
Let us build a house where
Love can dwell, and all can
can
safely live for free on everyone else's dime.
Our hearts to forgive. I've screwed it up.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
You not hear that? We're gonna have to fix that because Zoom has got something going on with.
Yeah, Zoom's got some.
Oh man.
Did someone copyright our Meanwhile in Oak
Oh, I
Park
think
jingle?
they might have. We'll have to just.
Oh boy.
Uh-oh.
Well, maybe I'll just do the video editing when I did that little clip before when I had that the previous episode with Bernarda.
I really like that. Almost like that better, but
I could drop it in there. People will know now that it was edited, but
they know when the jingle comes and when the jingle goes.
that's true. So, going forward, what do we have going down? Support our sponsor, Trinitine Brewing. I'm drinking a Our Lady of Mount Carmel Brown Ale, which is delicious today. Got my Trinitine Brewing glass, which is adorned with the official logo. So continue to support the Alcorn family as they're moving toward commercialization. And anything else exciting on the horizon? Oh, we're going to have a very special guest coming up in February. I won't even, just to keep people in suspense, I won't tell you the exact date, even though we have it booked. And that's the great Kendi Hall, author, member of the Society of St. Pius X, and official apologist in chief for Marcel Lefebvre, Bishop Marcel Lefebvre, Archbishop, in fact, will be coming on the show. So that should pique the interest of a lot of our more ardent Catholic listeners. Charlie, you I wanted to get briefly into before we close for the day and for the episode. You sent me a tweet about that I had a Twitter exchange with Rob from Avoiding Babylon, in which he was, in a sense, defending a minimally existent state, and I think I tore him a new one, but it's up to those who want to follow me on Twitter to see that. And you quickly opined on Twitter and messaged me that my whole case for it being harder to convert Catholics to libertarianism, especially anarchism, and anarcho-capitalism, is a much greater climb than the reverse or the reciprocal.
I'm not willing to give up my case over one guy, but
Right.
some of the things I've seen, not only through that thread, but also on Catholic Twitter, I think the hill's a little steeper than I thought it was. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
I don't know, and I don't know exactly why that is. I think we examined it in that one episode, but at some point we have to, as ardent Catholics, come to the conclusion that allowing for or permitting in our minds, or more so, not allowing ourselves to engage our imaginations to a point where we can we can envision a society in which such a persistent and, in quote, necessary evil. Why is it so necessary unless we're going to admit the existence of some sort of demiurge? Well, why do we admit to this thing going on? Why do we just allow it and permit it to go on? It seems very odd to me. It's the equivalent of, analogously, I shouldn't say equivalent, but it's analogous to when, I don't know if you saw the video of when Trump was doing a town hall on Fox and a woman who was ardently pro-life asked his position, which
Mhm.
is evolved, about pro-life. And he gave this answer like, well, go with your heart and support causes, but we have to win elections and stuff like that. It's like, okay, well, uh, you didn't really answer the question. Does life begin at conception? Ought it to be defended? And if you are going to head an institution that continually propagates the narrative that you're there to protect basic liberties, life, liberty, property, and you're allowing the evisceration of the most fundamental of them in the womb, well, you're not a principal candidate. You have no standards. You have no guidelines and postmarks for yourself. So, what's the point of this?
Yeah.
Why
Well,
allow it to persist? Why not see that when you have a government that you're forced, yes, to support, going and bombing Houthi rebels who live in the most abject poor conditions, and are trying to defend who they consider their brethren in Palestine from an abject genocide by inhibiting your vessels from going in and fueling the bombers that you're using to kill Palestinians and they themselves, and you have the moral blindness and audacity to say, well, they're in the wrong, and here's a Tomahawk missile for you. I mean, what are we supposed to, as Catholics, say? Oh, okay, well, I mean, we're supposed to be indifferent to the state. Come on, hate it. To hate the great French theologian, Father Reginald Garrigou-Lagrange, said, the greatest of saints, the most emotive, the most mystical, the most in tune and prayerful and contemplative, loved God with all of their being, and they saw it as part and parcel of their love for God to hate with as much passion as their love for God that which is evil. And if we have a monopoly on violence, which the state per Rothbard is obviously operating as and existing as, then we should hate the state with all of our being. I'm there. I've been there for a long time. I guess it's the goal of this podcast, or one of the end objectives, that it ought to, if we're going to attain success, it's going to be by having fellow Catholics in part come to that necessary conclusion.
amen. All right, everyone.
All right. Peace. God bless.
Take care.
Meanwhile in Oak Park,